Hi, and welcome back to the Woodworkers Club. Today we're going to do a real short video on veneering, and it's really going to focus on some of the questions that we primarily get from our customers. Primarily they're coming in and asking us, I've got a cabinet that my great-grandmother gave me, and the veneering starting to come off the top or the side, and how do I repair it? Or they're saying, I'm building a small box and I want to really make something unique on the top or the sides, really to make it stand out. The other question they have is, well, I've got my kitchen cabinets we're redoing. I really want those panels on the doors to really have a little contrasting display. So how do we, take these old doors and dress them up to make them really stand out? So what we're going to do is talk a little bit about how you can use veneering to solve those specific questions, and we'll actually step through the process. So we're going to go into the classroom and we're going to talk about all the different products you might need, all the tools you're going to need, and the different methods that you can use to actually create that veneering project. So follow me. So we're into the wood shop now, and we're going to be talking about veneering, and we're going to keep to the type of repair uses or smaller projects that, let's say, a beginner might want to consider using some of the veneering. But a lot of questions will come up, well, how difficult is it? What glue should I use? What kind of tools am I going to need to actually put a veneer onto whatever project they may be working on? So one of the things that we'll walk through our veneer aisle where we were just a few seconds ago, and we will go through the different types of glues that are available. And a lot of times the particular glue that you're going to select will depend upon the substrate or the material that you're actually applying the veneer to. Or maybe if you're doing a repair on an older piece of furniture, you'll find back in the 1800s, 1900s, they used something called hide glue, which is actually made from animal products. The advantage for the hide glue, it was heated up, and actually the hide glue then comes in a little crystal, which we do have here at the store, and you put this into a pot that is warmed up, and it actually becomes liquefied, and that can be put on to the wood or the cabinet that you are repairing. The advantage is if you heat the panels on the cabinet, you often can remove the old veneer and actually replace it with new veneer if it's been chipped or cracked. But you can actually heat it up with either a heat gun or an old iron and peel off the veneer that's there and replace it with a refreshed and new but color matched piece of veneer. So some of the other types of glue that they would consider using, you actually have, this is called old brown glue, which is also a type of hide glue. You have the pre-mixed hide glue from Titebond. You also have, depending upon the surface that you're applying the veneer to, you can use polyurethane, which, or also known as Gorilla Glue, is basically the same product, but this is the Titebond version of polyurethane as the Gorilla Glue. You have a Titebond extended, so if you need to work on a project that is going to take some time to lay out and you want to have a little extra time, you have the extended. And of course you have the original Titebond 1 that you can use on the wood, let's say a piece of plywood or other wood, or MDF that you're going to use as your substrate, and roll the glue on very evenly. You want a thin coat, and then you can also apply it to the veneer. Sometimes, depending upon the type of veneer you're putting on, you may need to put a coat onto the veneer and on the substrate. A lot of times you can just put a coat on the substrate and just put it on right on there and be ready to clamp very quickly. Now, if you're working on something that might be going outdoors, that you need waterproof veneer on, then you could use a general purpose epoxy and put that onto the piece that you're going to be veneering. It might be metal, it may be glass, it may be something or plastic that you want to apply the veneer to, and epoxy does very well in terms of providing that bond to non-wood surfaces, or if you're going to need a waterproof environment. So you have those kinds of glue, and of course Titebond does make what they call a cold press veneer. And a lot of times they'll use the cold press veneer if you are using, let's say, a vacuum bag, which is another way you can take the wood and put a lot of clamps together with another piece of wood and clamp it all together. Or a vacuum bag, actually, you insert it into a bag that will vacuum, it'll seal all up, like you see various food vacuum systems, and that will vacuum to approximately 1.5 atmospheres, giving you about 1,700 to 2,000 pounds per square inch of pressure, definitely keeping everything real nice and flat. Or if you're doing a curved door or curved structure, that's great for using that kind of environment. You don't have to build any forms. You can put the product into the bag, seal it up, and then it will conform to the shape that you're veneering. Okay? Now, a lot of times what you'll find is some of the veneer that you'll get, and let me get a piece here, is a piece of burl. And a lot of times this may be sitting around because burl has a tendency, you can't really see that too well, but a lot of times veneer will start to move on you because of all the different ways the grain is shifting. And so to flatten a piece of veneer so that it will lay nice and flat, you'll use what's called as veneer tamer. Okay? So what you'll do is you'll spritz this onto the veneer and put it into either your press or your vacuum bag with a piece of brown craft paper on both sides, and that'll absorb the liquid from the veneer. And you put the craft paper on the bottom and the top after wetting, not heavily, but just spritzing it onto the veneer, put it into there, clamp it down, and in a day this veneer will be perfectly flat and ready to be used on your project. Okay? So these are the various glues that you're going to use depending, like I said, on the substrate that you're actually going to be adhering the veneer to. Some of the other tools you'll find very useful are rollers. Okay, so you have different size rollers, and you can use what I call adhesive rollers. So just as a small 4-inch roller, they make the smaller diameter rollers as well to roll the glue on and to get ready for applying the veneer. You'll have, perhaps if you're doing a table and you need now to, and you're using a piece of plywood that you're attaching the veneer to, you'll need an edge band that will go around that piece of plywood to match the veneer that you've put on. So if you're using, let's say, a maple or walnut, red oak type of veneer on a table, then we'll have matching veneer that can be either peel and stick. So this is already has adhesive on here, so you just peel it and stick it on, or you use an iron to actually iron on, so it is pre-glued, and you'll just iron on the edge band. Now, of course, you can also use, a piece of 1/8 inch real wood and go ahead and apply an actual piece of wood around the edge as well. Veneers comes in all types of shapes and sizes, from the book match pieces in here that you can use to rolls. Here's a 24-inch by 8 foot roll, and you can get them as large as 4 feet wide by 8 feet long. You can get it with a wood backing. In other words, it's a thicker veneer, and it's wood to wood, or paperback. A lot of times people like the paperback because that will actually keep the veneer from cracking because it has a backing that will pick up the glue and allow you to adhere to the substrate very easily. You also can get that same rolls of veneer with a peel and stick. So if you're using let's say a side panel on a table or that you are refinishing, you can cut out the peel and stick exactly to fit the replacement and peel the backing off and line it up and just rub it down with like a plastic squeegee. So you just rub down the panel to adhere, make sure that the adhesive back adheres evenly with no gaps or bubbles. So you'll need a knife, a razor knife, or you can also use, if you're doing a larger project, this is called a veneer knife. So you can also set up, let's say, 2 pieces of veneer on top of each other, get a straight edge, and actually cut that veneer all the way down. Now when you unfold it, you'll have a book match set of the veneer with a nice clean line that you're going to put together. So in this case here we have 2 pieces of veneer that we may want to join, and as you can see they are book matched. So now if I want to fold that over, get a piece of my straight edge on here and cut a clean line on here, you can use, like I said, a razor knife, you can use a veneer saw, you even can use a plunge saw, like a Festool plunge saw with a guide rail on here to guide that saw. Be very sure you get a really good blade on there, probably with 50 or more teeth per inch to give you a real clean edge on the veneer. And then when you open it up, those edges will be nice and straight and be ready to join up. Now when you're joining your veneer pieces like this, you turn it over, and we're going to use this as my back, and what you're going to use is something called veneer tape. Now veneer tape is very, very thin, and it has just a little bit of glue on one side, and you'll have just a little sponge, a damp sponge. You'll measure out the tape, or you'll have several pieces of tape to start off with. Let's, for example, we'll use on this one here 2 or 3 pieces to start off with, and I'll put this through, just dampen this up, have these laid out, and I'll put them perpendicular across the veneer that I'm going to be joining. Okay, and put this on so that this will hold the 2 pieces together. Then I'll take a larger piece and run it across the whole seam. Okay, and when you're done, it'll dry fairly quickly, and that veneer tape you'll actually leave, because it's so thin it won't show up when you then take the whole piece, turn it back over now, and they'll be joined together, and actually apply it to your surface. Here's an example of that. Here's a 4 square piece. You actually have 4 pieces of veneer that have both book matched in both directions, with an inlay all around the edge and an edge piece that with a mitered corner. So these pieces were laid out, the tape on the back, so everything was smooth and all joined very exact, and then we applied the glue, positioned the veneer piece on here, and we put it into a vacuum bag. This is a fairly large piece, and that adhered. Now, whenever you are working with, let's say, a substrate like MDF. Not only do you have to veneer the front that you're going to see, but you'll also veneer the back. Okay? So you always, especially on MDF or plywood, you'll put veneer on both sides of the substrate. Whenever you look at a piece of plywood and you count the number of layers in a piece of plywood, it's always odd number. So you always find a 5 layer piece of plywood, 7 layer, 11 layer. That's because you have your central, and then they put 2 pieces of plywood or layers on both sides, and they build it up. The reason they do that is if you have glue on just one side, as that glue dries, it will actually create tension in that wood, causing the board to curl up, because as the glue dries, it wants to pull there's added tension to the wood, and actually want to curl the wood, and you actually get a bow in the wood. By putting veneer on both sides, you create an offsetting tension on the veneering project, so it remains nice and straight, as this one has for several years. Here's one we did the other day as part of our demonstration. This is a piece of 1-inch MDF, and we just took one of our pieces, rolled out the glue on it, put it into a bag for about an hour, and you've got a beautiful piece that can be used. Now let's say if this were going into a kitchen panel. So if I want to redo my kitchen doors, and as I'm using a shaker style, I've got my rail and style, and I can use either plywood or MDF and dress up that MDF on both sides with some beautiful veneer that, you know, if you were to buy a solid piece of burl, it'd be prohibitively expensive. So, all right, so we've gone through the types of uses, some of the tools that you'll be using, and the approach that you could use for actually veneering your next project. So if you're in the neighborhood of the Woodworkers Club and the Woodcraft of Rockville, come on by, and we'd be glad to step you through and show you all of the different tools and some of the examples that we have of the veneer that we sell. We also have a fairly good library of books available that Craig Thibodeau, you'll look him up on the YouTube or in Google, very well-known veneering author, craftsman, and has written a number of great books. You also have Jonathan Benson. He does also a pretty good job of talking about veneering and using for inlays on various projects, and even a book on how to vacuum press your next veneering project. So these and others are available in our library. So come on by. Look forward to seeing you.